Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hi, this is Nick Anastasiou, story editor on Star Wars The Clone Wars and Star Wars Bad Batch. And you are listening to Aggressive Negotiations.
That's right, it's Aggressive Negotiations, your little slice of Star Wars heaven. Here on the Nerd Party Network, I am one of your hosts, Jedi Master John Mills, and joining me after some really interesting hyperspace lane navigation that we had to get through, which is why this transmission took a little bit of time to get to y'all, is my dear friend, Jedi Master Matthew Rushing. Matt, are you happy to be back in the co-pilot's chair here with me as Baby Yoda once again figures out how to accelerate and brake without killing us all?
Well, it definitely has reminded me just the dangers of light speed skipping. So be very careful when you're doing that, y'all, because you just never know where you're going to end up. And when you end up in chiss space, transmissions don't reach out. So that's where we ended up. I got to say, though, I had some wonderful chiss steak. I got to say, I'm glad we visited there.
Well, we had a great time at Ruth's Chiss Steakhouse. And of course, I want to say that light speed skipping did not happen. It's just that Matt had so much whiskey with his Chiss steak that he just blacked out from time to time. It was a very trying.
Oh, that's what that was.
Experience.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, of course, you can reach out to us on Twitter at the Jedi Masters, or is it X now? I don't know. Is it X? Is it Twitter? Who knows? It's the same app you were using. Who cares? And you can, of course, find the network at Join Nerd Party, and you can find the Nerd Party on Facebook and Instagram, where all the cool kids are. Anyway, all that aside, we come back to the chair here, Matt. We've been talking about different things that are going on. Different news is breaking as we record this. Ahsoka is still in our future, and we're all excited about the possibilities and all of those sorts of things. But Bob Iger, Bobby as I like to call him, he made some interesting comments recently. And Bobby was basically saying that along with Marvel, he felt there was too much content being served. Now, you and I, we've talked over on the 602 Club about Marvel, specifically Phase 4, and how the content does seem to have gotten a little out of control. But I'm going to throw the question to you right here. Do you actually agree with that sentiment about Star Wars? Is the problem that there's too much content?
It's when it comes to the idea of there being too much content, I think that was something that was applicable to Disney buying Star Wars and immediately rushing into production 7, 8, and 9. And not necessarily, taking the time. And I think we've talked about that many times on this show as we've looked back at the sequel trilogy. And I think whether you like the sequel trilogy or didn't like it, I think everybody can admit that there were some ups and downs with that trilogy, and that trilogy could have most likely just benefited from there being more time between each of the films to truly allow all of the creatives behind the scene to not only finish their film, but then see kind of what the audience reaction was, and then kind of go into the next film, which is, exactly what George did with the prequels specifically, and there were, documented changes that kind of happened because of that, specifically between episode 1 and 2. And different, characters that weren't as, abundantly on screen like Jar Jar Binks. So, I think that was definitely the case. And then, of course, because of that jumbled mess behind the scenes, the movie that they were working on first, even before, Disney bought Lucasfilm, which was the Solo film, ends up getting pushed back, which then hurts that film, I think, as well in its production and everything. So, I do think that there's some legitimacy to that. Now, as we've moved throughout the rest of the years, especially after the sequel trilogy finished, I wouldn't necessarily say that, Star Wars has really rushed things out. I think we have had some issues with quality, I think, of work, in the sense that because there's so much going on at effects houses these days, and there's so few effects houses anymore because they've all put each other out of business, things aren't necessarily the quality standards look-wise that we're used to. But I don't personally feel as though Star Wars has suffered as much as, say, Marvel has, when it comes to the idea of just too much content too quickly, except for, really the beginning.
I agree. Those 5 movies, it was too much too quick, and they did not allow for proper development of everything. I would consider, we both know that Solo, I'm absolutely over the moon for. You're over the moon for Rogue One, and I like it well enough. Those are the two that for some reason were successful.
I mean, even with behind the scenes shenanigans going on, it's not like either of those films didn't have some, serious things happen behind the scenes.
But once we go past that, you have The Mandalorian coming out and sort of saving Star Wars as a cultural phenom before Rise of Skywalker even comes out. And then basically it's been Mandalorian, the most in the public eye, and The Bad Batch, which is a love letter for the fans, so far as I'm concerned. And we've had a couple of things come out, Tales of the Jedi and Visions, both seasons 1 and 2.
Final season of the Clone Wars.
Final season of the Clone Wars, you're right. And I wouldn't think, none of those feel like too much. None of them have been so tightly packed together that when Tales of the Jedi came out, I was like, oh, another Star Wars show. I was like, yeah, another Star Wars show. Excellent. When season 2 of The Mandalorian was coming up and when the hype for season 3 was coming, it was like, okay, good. This is coming back. I'm looking forward to it. And I think the key word that you've hit on here is, and people might roll their eyes, but it's quality. Because with the things that I'm citing to you, Tales of the Jedi, The Bad Batch, the final season of the Clone Wars, the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian, and to an extent the third, there's quality to those. You could have released those back to back, and each one I would have looked at and said, this is great. This is fantastic stuff. So long as what you're delivering to me is consistently of a certain quality, I'm not going to complain about the frequency. The reason I complain about Marvel in Phase 4 is I haven't liked a lot of it. And a lot of it has looked and felt like it was just sort of slapdash. Like you look at Moon Knight, and the premise is all fine, but I'm sitting there and I watch the series and I think, this really could have been a movie. You're really like stretching this. And you and I finally recently saw, thanks to Assembling Avengers over on 602 Club, right? Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. And I was like, what happened here? Like there are things here where it feels like I'm watching a Sam Raimi movie. And then there are parts where it doesn't. Basically, the question becomes, do you think Iger is throwing there's too much stuff out there as sort of a smokescreen topic so that we're not focusing on the quality? We're saying, oh, good, this means they're going to slow down. Mm-hmm. We know immediately that means that's a code signal for we're going to focus on quality, quote unquote.
Yeah, I think the question is interesting. And I don't know exactly. Again, I think, even in the articles, it feels like he's throwing, Marvel into the bus more than Star Wars, because in all honesty, like you said, this is not really a Star Wars problem in the sense that, over the last few years, we've just had an outrageous amount of Star Wars content coming. I think, and you brought up a good example of the ways in which Marvel, especially last year, where Phase 4 just had so much content coming at you, and it felt like every month there was something new in Marvel, whether it was on Disney Plus or whether it was a film, that I think is absolutely where it becomes just so hard to catch up with and to keep current with. Star Wars, on the other side of that, we had to wait so long between seasons 2 and 3 for The Mandalorian, and so by the time that we got to season 3, people were clamoring for it. And I think that's kind of the place that Star Wars wants to be in, where, maybe you just have a couple of live action things come out, whether it's a film or TV, Disney Plus, and then animated work. And that's it, and maybe they've kind of hit on that where, we kind of had that, I think, last year where it was the Bad Batch or I guess this year, Bad Batch, Mandalorian, and, we're going to get Ahsoka. And then we know sometime, I think, maybe closer to the end of the year, I think Skeleton Crew is supposed to come out. And so, those are all building towards something as well. I mean, these are all connected to this time period of the New Republic. And so they're working to build something specific, because we also know that this is kind of all going to culminate, it seems like, is what they announced with the Filoni film. And so they maybe learned some mistakes from some of the mistakes of the past of trying to go too fast and not necessarily planning as well as they could have. And this seems to have more of a plan to it to get us to a certain point. And then you have these other 2 films we know that are, supposedly going to be happening. And so it feels like, in some areas of Star Wars, we have kind of a pretty solid plan. And then other places, it still feels almost as like we're kind of throwing darts at a Star Wars dartboard and kind of like seeing where that stuck and like, oh, okay, we're going to do it, beginning of the Jedi, Dawn of the Jedi. And then, so it's, again, I don't feel like it's too much. I think really just what it comes down to, and I think you kind of nailed it on the head just a few minutes ago when you're just saying it's about quality, right? If things are of quality as they're coming out, that's really all anybody cares about.
Very true. Very true. And this is where I really want to throw the challenge flag, because you mentioned the movies. We haven't had a movie in years. And we're not going to have another movie for years. So, like, saying that there's too much content is absurd. I want to ask you a question. Have you watched any of Young Jedi Adventures?
I haven't seen that. It's been one of those things.
That's exactly my point. I turned on Disney Plus one day and Young Jedi Adventures was there, and I said, "The hell is this?" I didn't even know it was coming out, and now it comes up and it's season 2, and I'm like, my kid actually enjoys it well enough, and I'm sitting there, but I'm floored because I'm like, number one, I contest the idea that there's too much content, and number 2, you're not even promoting the content you have adequately. Bad Batch is not getting enough promotion.
No.
At all.
No, it's not.
Young Jedi Adventures, not enough promotion. Visions, I could walk out to my family right now and be like, hey, Star Wars Visions. And they would look at me and they would say, how much whiskey have you had tonight? Because what are you
They'd
even
be
talking
like,
about?
what?
So my question becomes, isn't the problem really the fact that there's no sense of hype about Star Wars right now?
Yeah.
Who's in charge of the hype machine?
Yeah.
Back when it was Howard Rothman, it was a near religious fervor every time something new Star Wars came out, whether it was a game or a book or a toy line or something like that. It was like, oh my gosh, they knew how to push my buttons. Why is it that Disney can't figure out how to promote Star Wars? The stuff promotes itself pretty much, and they can't generate excitement about it outside of Baby Yoda.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very weird thing. And like you said, I heartily agree that Bad Batch does not get the promotion it should. I think, and maybe let me posit this to you. Do you think maybe it's that, one of the things about Star Wars that helped the hype was always when you could buy the latest thing on home video. And that kind of reignited that, right? And you were adding, because, Star Wars fans are collectors as well. So the fact that we can't buy The Mandalorian on 4K, we can't buy the last season of the Clone Wars on 4K, can't get Bad Batch on 4K, all of these things to which Star Wars fans are big fans of, right, is owning the physical media. I think that might be one of the ways in which you are actually hurting yourself rather than helping yourself, because and this is the thing. I have the physical media of things, right? And there are still times when I just flip on the streaming thing because it's just easier. I'm lazy enough that I don't want to go upstairs, or maybe I'm traveling or whatever. And so, right, having physical media doesn't hurt me using the streaming service. And sometimes it maybe even helps it. And so I don't know. Am I crazy here?
No, and I'm going to try to hit on every point that you've dredged up in my brain here. One, no, owning physical media and being able to stream it at the same time. I still have my Doors albums, and I still have Sammy Hagar CDs, and I keep them and I play them sometimes. But yeah, sometimes I'll pull up Spotify or I'll go to Amazon Prime and I'm like, I'm going to watch or listen to this here, right? Because I'm out and about, whatever. And it's just, I don't have anywhere to play a DVD or something. Additionally, when you have a Blu-ray, when you have a 4K or whatever, and it's a physical release, you get supplementary materials. And I will go ahead and say to you that I think, in addition to being collectors, Star Wars fans were spoiled by the idea that we got, and we've talked about this on however many previous episodes, that George Lucas, if he hadn't been a filmmaker, would have been the best teacher you ever had in your life. Because I feel like, whether it's true or not, I know how to make a film because he showed all of that stuff, warts and all. He showed the moments of doubt. He showed the things that went wrong. He showed the things he had to change his mind about. And it wasn't just him. He's obviously the central figure in the whole story. But you would see John Knowles struggle with decisions and lighting and placement and stuff like that. You'd see, all these different department heads sitting there and saying, I don't know really what I want to do. And the design process for General Grievous leading up to episode 3 was like, we don't know which one it's gonna work. And you see the guy running around. And he's like, I'm looking for inspiration. What is my guy gonna look like? I don't know. I only have an hour, right? And I think that is a very big thing, because if you even look at Light and Magic, the documentary about ILM, all of us are sitting there saying, the one part of history that isn't very well documented, you guys didn't give to me. All you did was just regurgitate stuff I already knew. And with each new release, just of the Star Wars films, new documentaries, new behind the scenes, new clips, new Easter eggs, every single darn time. So yeah, I think you're right. The physical media thing, you hold on to that because you want the archival library of stuff. And then the streaming is just supposed to be a supplement. I'm not going to throw away Disney Plus because I've got Star Wars on 4K. Like you said, I'm going to turn it on every so often. And on top of that, just to make certain segments of the audience cheer, maybe I want to watch an earlier version and not just the 4K version. Maybe I want to be reminded of what it was like in 1977 or 81 or 87 or 91 or 95 or 97 or 2004 or 2011. Right? Maybe I do. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, so I'm thinking about that as being a thing that kind of, I think, hurts that. And I also think too, and this is a whole other side of things when we think of, is there too much Star Wars? And I also think that we are in a place where more and more and more the literature side of things, whether that's books or comics, has become such a niche market at this point that people just really, it's not capturing people's imaginations in the way that it used to. I mean, I think, except for, I know that Timothy Zahn's Thrawn novels are the ones that have, really kind of hit the ground and made a dent in any way, shape, or form. And part of that, I think, is that, they were more accessible to more fans, right? Because so many of us are familiar with the character. And of course, Rebels had made him even more familiar to people. And so I think all of that is to me, seems like that's something to which has also not been helping the Star Wars market in the way that it could. And a big part of that is because, the thing that fans loved got taken away from them in the sense of what was happening in the EU. And I don't feel like they've ever truly been able to find a way to make books canon and make them feel important enough where people felt like I have to read this or else like I don't know what's happening. And I think that's a really hard place to be. And I just don't know if they've really, again, I think some of the books have been phenomenal. We've talked about them. We both loved, Claudia Gray's first couple books with Lost Stars and Bloodline. We both really loved the Thrawn Ascendancy trilogy. There have been some other things like that.
The Dooku one.
Yes.
Master and Apprentice was solid.
Yeah. Again.
But the thing is, that goes right into the point I was going to throw back at you. That's going to be the controversial one. Do you know why the books aren't capturing people as much? I know I don't really read them. Because they're not talking about characters that I care about.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. Yeah.
I mean, look, the fire's gone out of not everyone, but a lot of people like myself. I've got enough distance. I don't really care what happened between Ben Solo and Luke Skywalker anymore. And if they had struck when the iron was appropriately hot, I would have cared. And I would have devoured it because I would have said, give me something I can work with here. I wanted it. I wanted to know. And they just waited too long. And then by the time they came out with anything that hinted at it, I was like, okay, that's fine. Whatever. And it was a comic series. And I was like, who's even going to read this?
Mm-hmm.
And so the thing is, like all of these things, the reason the EU was so beloved before Disney was if you were a prequel fan, you loved reading the Republic Commando stuff. You loved learning about Mace Windu and Deepa Billaba. You loved learning about all of these different things going on with Anakin between episode 1 and episode 2. There's this 10-year gap. You have a lot of room to play in there and do world building. And then with the other EU, you're talking about Luke, Han, and Leia, the big original 3. Of course you care about them.
Yeah.
So again, I don't think that it's too much content. I think it's content that's not resonating with as many people as I would have liked it to, or it's not resonating with as many people as it would have in the past.
Well, and I think, when I look at this Ahsoka series coming out and the way in which it is, one of the beauties of what George did with the help of Dave Filoni, of course, in the Clone Wars series, was to bring in things that fans loved from the EU because they respected it. George was always willing to see something he liked and be like, that's a good idea, we're using that. I mean, that's how Aayla Secura became a Jedi. He saw the cover of the comic and was like, that's super cool. We need a bunch of Jedi anyway for, episode 2. Let's put her in the background. That's awesome, right? But then as the Clone Wars came out, there were all of these places in which George could begin to just kind of play with ideas that people had introduced into Star Wars, but in his way. And so, I think that's the thing that, this Ahsoka series seems to be doing too. Dave is taking something that we absolutely love with the Thrawn trilogy from Zahn, and he's basically now doing his version of that with all of the characters that exist for him to be able to play with. Genius. You take something that people already love and you just give them that with your spin on it, which is what actually made Marvel so successful when it started. It was taking things that people kind of loved and doing it with their spin on it and presenting it to a mass audience. And so, that's one of the things where if Star Wars does want to continue to be relevant, you have to find ways to do those type of things, or you're doing what The Mandalorian did, right? Where you're sitting down and you're thinking about Star Wars and what makes it successful as a storytelling medium, and then you're using those principles to be able to introduce us to new characters that feel as though they fit seamlessly into the world that you've created already. And, I think that's why everybody loved that show, because you watched it and it immediately just kind of felt like Star Wars, because it followed all of the main principles of the series, and yet gave us kind of a new fun twist on, well, now we're going to follow the lone gunslinger and watch him slowly find himself into a family. That's a great story, because it feels familiar and different all at the same time.
And then every so often pin it to a familiar character so that you have a reference point, so you know what's going on.
Exactly.
And how it relates to the larger story. But I'll tell you, we're not going to solve it in a single show. But I just know, Matt, that there is somebody out there dying to tell you what you got wrong in your estimation of what's going on with the world of Star Wars right now. Where can they find you online to set your record straight?
Well, isn't that just why we invented social media? And you can find me all over social media under the name MattRushing02. Of course, I'm here on the network with a completed show with Drea Kaufman talking about every single chapter of the Harry Potter series, one chapter at a time. You'll also find me over on the TFM network talking about a bunch of different things. One place that happens is in the 602 Club, talking about all of the fandoms that we love. John is a frequent guest over there. We've got some bonus shows you can check out as well. You can also find me doing Warp 5, The Orb, Literary Treks, Saddle Up, and The Artificial Tango. But John, if people want to tell you just how right you got things, which would be a plus because it doesn't happen very often, where can people find you?
Very often. It never happens, Matt. Perhaps I should introduce you to my wife and children. I'm always wrong. But if you want to pile on, or if you want to just pay me a compliment, which, that's fine too. Castle Junkie out there on your social network of choice. Have a lot of fun on Letterboxd because I talk about movies, and Goodreads, where I read controversial things sometimes just because if you tell me something's controversial, I get interested in it. And you can find me here on the network co-hosting a show called House Lights with Darren Moser and Tristan Riddell, where we talk about the work of directors through all different sorts of crazy combinations that we come up with. But Matt, I'll tell you something. It seems that Baby Yoda is, okay, I'm nervous. His finger is hovering over the hyperdrive button again. So I think it's time to close these negotiations.
John, negotiations are closed.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.